On today's Locked On Jayhawks, we get to the bottom line. Which KU player has a better chance to win Heisman, Devin Neal or Jalon Daniels?
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Derek Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. He's Nick Schwert. You can find him at Nick_Schwert on Twitter. And on today's Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be talking Heisman talk. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe. And yeah, we're going to get into it. Jalon Daniels, Devin Neal, better Heisman case. What's better for KU? Of which one kind of comes out there. We'll get to another episode of Who Cares, featuring some David Coit stuff, KU football stadium, and more, and a little Who Stat Line Is It Anyway, featuring some KU football stuff that might pertain to some of the stuff in the open that we're talking about here. And this episode of the show is brought to you by Ultimate College Football Head Coach. It's a brand new mobile game that's completely free. They have no ads. It's 100% playable offline. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all one word, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your program. Begin your coaching legacy today. All right, so Nick, first of all, I already have come up with the Heisman campaign, hashtag Neal for Heisman. You have to come up with the Jalon Daniels Heisman campaign.
Original.
So you have to come up. We'll get it because he wears the number 4, right? So it works out, right?
Right.
There you go. No, but in all reality, Devin Neal or Jalon Daniels, if you look at like FanDuel, it's not even a discussion. Jalon Daniels is plus 3,000, 30-1 to win the Heisman. That's tied 13th among players for odds. Devin Neal, I went through the entire thing. He's not even on there. You can't even find his odds. Yet somehow Arch Manning, who's the backup quarterback at Texas, is 120-1 odds. There are players that are going up to 500-1 odds. Could we not find a spot for Devin Neal here? So I don't know where he would be if he's just forgotten, if he would come in a little better on those odds. If he was 500-1, I would definitely be throwing down some change on that. But anyway, who do you think has a better chance to win the Heisman? Because the odds certainly say JD, but I don't know if I agree with that.
Yeah, so this is funny because you brought this up as like a one-off a couple of weeks ago on here. And then I was debating it last week with a couple other guys. And I think the answer is Jalon Daniels, but I was trying to play devil's advocate. I was trying to make the case for Devin Neal, and the guys I was talking to, they wouldn't hear it because they were using, recent history, data, reason to suggest that it is impossible for a running back in either college football or the NFL to take home the most prestigious award, Heisman or MVP. And so I went down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out what it would take. And I'm sure you've already done this research, so I'm going to beat you to the punch. The last Heisman finalist, that was a running back, not even winner. The last Heisman finalist was 2017 Bryce Love out of Stanford, which, shout out to Bryce Love wherever he's at, whatever he's doing. But he had over 2,000 yards and 19 touchdowns. And he didn't win it, mind you. Like, he didn't win the Heisman that year. I think that would have been Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So even if you have, as a running back, this insane statistical season, it is undeniable. You have to also, I think, be on the best team in America, or unequivocally be the best player in America. Because look at Christian McCaffrey in the NFL last year. I think you could make the case Christian McCaffrey was the best football player in the world last year, but he didn't win MVP. And it kind of leaves you with this idea that, well, if he's not going to win it that year, then no running back will ever win it unless we see this huge shift in offense across football to where we are going back to what we saw in the late 2000s, where you had guys toting the rock 300 times a year, going for 2,000 yards, scoring 20, 25, 30 plus touchdowns, because that is the baseline. For Jalon Daniels, the argument's much easier. Jalon Daniels doesn't have to break records. Jalon Daniels doesn't have to lead the country in passing yards. He doesn't have to lead the country in passing touchdowns. He just needs to be insanely good on a really good football team. that is why the answer has to be Jalon Daniels, because the argument for how you even get there is a lot more obtainable than it would be for Devin Neal.
Here's where I differ on that, though. When you look at the past, because you're right, it is all quarterbacks who are winning the awards. Now, you can go back and say, well, 3 of the top 10 last year were running backs, but none of them were top 5. Or you can go back and find certain years, like Kenneth Walker probably should have been an invitee a couple of years ago, but he ended up finishing 6th behind like Will Anderson and some other guys. And there's others you can do that with. Like maybe you could have done that with Ollie Gordon last year or going back a few years beyond that. Here's what gets me, though, that I think makes it a little tougher for JD. So you look at the winners who are quarterbacks. Like we go back to last year, Jaden Daniels wins the award. Okay, that is a quarterback. But Jaden Daniels had 3,800 passing yards and 1,100 rushing yards. So he basically had 5,000 total yards. Caleb Williams had 4,500 passing yards. Bryce Young, the year before that, 4,800 passing yards. You go back 2 years before that because you had the Devontae Smith receiver season in between. Joe Burrow wins it. 5,600 passing yards. Kyler Murray, 4,400 almost passing yards, plus several hundred more rushing yards. Baker Mayfield, 4,600 passing yards. You look back at the past quarterbacks who have all won this award, the only guys who aren't throwing for 4,000 yards are Lamar Jackson, who had 3,500, but he ran for like 1,500, and Jaden Daniels, who just missed it and had those 1,100 extra rushing yards. If I go back and look at Jalon Daniels' stats, he obviously has as much impact as any quarterback in the country. But in terms of the raw stats, this is what he's done over his last 12 games when you account for the games that he's played, his junior plus, or I guess his third year plus his fourth year in 2022 plus 2023. 2,700 yards, 23 touchdowns. So again, he's as impactful as any player in the country. But when you compare those raw numbers to the raw numbers of the past Heisman winning quarterbacks, I think there's a better avenue for Devin Neal having like an 1,800-yard season, and he has the story behind him. Because what's the other thing? When you look at those running backs who have been in that discussion, right? You have a year where a fifth-place finisher was Najee Harris of Alabama. Well, he has Devontae Smith and Mac Jones on his team. He has a loaded team. If you are Devin Neal and you run for all this yardage, and you have the story of like a 10-2 at Kansas is going to hit different for some voters than a 12-1 at Ohio State. Like it just is. They're going to have the narrative in the same way that like Baylor did with RG3 or Johnny Manziel did with Texas A&M. And I think Devin Neal has a chance to take that. Plus you add into the account that like, what if Jalon Daniels misses a couple games, right? Then it's just a hands down who has the better chance.
Bro, no, because you said 1,800 yards. You should have said like 2,400 just to make the case, because 1,800 yards, you're not even sniffing an invite at 1,800. I don't care if you're 10-2. It just won't happen. The numbers have to be outrageous because of how much value we put on vertical offenses and how much value we put on the quarterback position in 2024. Like, regardless of what you thought about J.J. McCarthy last year or Stetson Bennett the year before, right? That's kind of the idea of nobody thinks these are the best players in college football, but they were the quarterbacks on some of the best teams, on eventual national championship winning teams. I don't think that line of thinking works for running backs. I just don't, unless you have a 2,000-yard season, a 25 like that. To me, that's where the bar is. Like, talk to me when you get to 2K, and talk to me when you get to 22, 23 touchdowns. Because all the argument, like, I get your argument. That is an argument for Devin Neal over Jalon Daniels, but also it's an argument that KU doesn't have a shot at winning the Heisman. Like, if you're telling me JD has no shot, then I'm led to believe that nobody has a shot. I will say this. Go look at Jason Bean's stat line from that bowl game, from the UNLV game, because just saying, that was one game, new offensive coordinator on like 450 yards, 6 touchdowns. Do we get to just extrapolate that over a full season for Jalon Daniels?
I mean, it wasn't this offensive coordinator that was the problem. And I don't know.
But it was a different one.
Right.
But it was a different one.
So, yeah, I don't know. I do think, though, Devin Neal has the better chance of finishing top 10. I mean, if you want to argue the winner.
But nobody, history doesn't remember the guy who finished 7th in the Heisman, you know? You got to get an invite.
It'd be a big deal. Kansas only had 3 players ever finish, top 10, right? It'd be a big deal.
What did Reesing finish? Like 6th?
Didn't finish top 10.
Huh.
Yeah.
Didn't even get top 10?
Devin Neal would be the only running back to do so, which is pretty crazy considering, like, that's the one position where it's like, KU doesn't have this illustrious football history, but it's like running back, they got some dudes, so I think that would be interesting. Real quick question to that. What do you think would be more beneficial to the team, though? Like if I told you Devin Neal is going to win the Heisman, like I've seen it in the future, or Jalon Daniels is going to win the Heisman, what do you think would be more beneficial? Because you could make the argument still.
Like you mean to the program or this season?
To this season, to the team maxing out at whatever they are.
I would say Jalon Daniels for this reason, though. Because if you told me Jalon Daniels is going to win the Heisman, you know what that guarantees me? He's healthy all season. Because if you remove that, if you remove any amount of certainty about JD's health this year, I start to become very concerned about what could happen to this team. There is no more training wheel. There's no more safety valve of Jason Bean. And if JD is once again plagued by injuries, I'm frightened for what can happen. So the Heisman will be great, but what it really tells me is he's healthy all season, and that's the best thing that KU could possibly get out of this year. What would you do with yourself? What would you do as a Kansas fan if JD gets injured again, can't finish the season, and then you have to live the rest of your life wondering what would have happened if we would have just gotten like one full season of peak Jalon Daniels? I don't think I can stomach that the rest of my life. I need, even if it sucks, even if KU sucks and he sucks, I just need to see him healthy for a year. That way I can live without the what if.
All right, let's continue on with some fun conversation. Who cares? A little David Coit, KU basketball, a little more KU football on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We are brought to you by Ibata. It's summertime, which means it's barbecue season. Stock up on all of your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibata. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. It's time you joined over 50 million users who use Ibata. That includes my wife. You can earn cash back every time you shop. Right now, Ibata is offering their listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back. And again, use code LOCKEDONCollege. That is Ibata, IBOTTA, in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All right, let's get to another episode of Who Cares? I'm going to give two topics. You tell me which one you care more about and why. KU basketball made a late addition. They added David Coit, who's a over 20 point per game scorer from Northern Illinois. That or KU football being 7 days away.
Oh, KU football being 7 days away. That is, dude, if you find me the person who would answer Diggy Coit there. Find me the person who says they're more excited about little itty bitty Diggy Coit, all 5'8", 160 pounds of him. By the way, being available that late in the summer, what's going on there? Versus college football returning in 1 week. You want to talk to me in December? We can have that conversation. But I would be pretty disgusted at the person who would sit in front of me and try to make the argument that a guy who's going to average 6 minutes a game for KU basketball this year is more interesting than Kansas football returning for what could be the greatest season of our lifetimes.
I mean, you could just argue though that, but like, it's not here, and it's making you like the fact that it's not here.
Neither is basketball season.
No, I know. I agree. I'm just devil's advocate, but yeah, for sure.
By the way, one thing. No, I got another thing here. One thing on Diggy Coit. Fran Fraschilla tweeted like 3 weeks ago. I was not plugged into the Diggy Coit situation. I see him tweeting that like, this guy, remember when KU got Remy Martin, he wasn't great right away, and he didn't, I'm paraphrasing obviously. He wasn't great right away, but he was money when it counted most. KU blah, 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 invoking Diggy Coit. Stop it. Stop it. I'm so sick of these college basketball talking heads constantly comparing every new Kansas point guard to a great guard of Kansas past. Do you remember when we were going through about this time in the year, Bobby Pettiford comes on board, right? Like, not really a high profile recruit, but Oh, he's tough. He's a dog. You know, he's kind of got a little, people were saying he's kind of got a little Frank Mason in him. Are you kidding me? Are we just going to do this now with every new guard that signs? They are either similar to Frank Mason, Sharon Collins, or Devontae Graham. Nobody's ever like, yo, this guy reminds me a little of Jeff Hawkins. You know, no, there's no, hey, this guy reminds me a little of Brady Morningstar. It's always like going straight to, we have to stop. Okay? It's Diggy Coit. He is going to play 5 minutes a game. I just took a minute off for that tweet. 5 minutes a game. He is not Remy Martin. He is not going to lead this team to a national championship in March. I'm sorry I had to get that off my chest.
Okay, so all that being said, if he's not Remy Martin, who do you compare him to for past KU guard?
I'll give him Joe Yesufu. I'll give him Bobby Pettiford. Bobby Pettiford wasn't Frank Mason, but Diggy Coit is Bobby Pettiford.
Okay. Who starts at the center position for KU football? That's a fun competition right now. Do you care more about that or who wins the backup quarterback job?
You have to be kidding me with these questions. I can't tell you who the backup center is. Actually, you know what?
No, who's going to win the starting center?
It doesn't matter. I can't tell you.
Football.
The only reason I know one center on the roster, and people can listen to this and say, well, you're not a real fan. Fine. I don't care. I don't care who's starting at nickel corner either. I do care. I know there's a center on the roster, by the way, named Calvin Clements, because in my online dynasty, I'm going to find it. Well, I move him to center, and he's an All-American center by the time he's a senior. So that's who I want.
Let Lance Leipold know that.
Yeah, that's who I want to be the starting center. I don't know if he's currently in the competition, but maybe let's get him a few reps. I do care who the backup quarterback is going to be because, like we said with Jalon Daniels, his health is the biggest question mark, right? Would you agree with that? It is the number one storyline heading into this season is what happened. Is he going to be healthy, and what happens if he's not? Because there's no more Jason Bean, who ended up being a godsend last year. And so you're basically thrust into two unknowns. Is it going to be Cole Ballard, who we saw sparingly and they certainly tried to protect? Like, what does he look like in year two? Versus the unknown of Isaiah Marshall, which, like, tantalizing, exciting, athlete, but a freshman. And it's just, I think that's the scariest part is we've had such terrible quarterback luck at Kansas for so long. And then you not only got Jalon Daniels, but when he went down, you had another guy who would have been the greatest quarterback of the last 15 years of Kansas football. There is always going to be fear about, like, what is next, because next is coming very soon. We know it's at least coming next year. We hope it's not coming this season with an early into Jalon's year. So yeah, I'm going to be really interested to see what that quarterback room looks like.
I've been saying here on the show, if you guaranteed me 11 Jalon Daniels games. So you're guaranteed to miss one. You don't know which one it is. It could be that K-State one, which that would suck. But, like, if you guaranteed me 11. It could also be 11,
Lindenwood.
It could.
You know?
It could. If you guaranteed me 11, I would take it. Like, wouldn't even think about it. What's the number that you would have to go to be like, I would take it?
Like the lowest number I would take? Oh, gosh. What's the most he's played? 2 years ago, he played 9, right?
Yeah, basically 8.5.
Yeah.
But that was of 13 games. So I'm just talking regular season. So really it was 7.5.
I'm kind of in all or nothing mode with this season. I know a lot of people I've talked to are more of like, no, 10 wins that's a great aspiration, but the goal should just be, get to 8 again, get to 9. That would be fantastic. After this year, you're basically starting over with a new core, with a new nucleus of guys that you try to win with. So, like, I want to see this team win 10 games. Like, that is my goal for them this year. I know it's a little bit lofty, but that is why it's tough for me to accept. Like, if you told me it was 8 games for Jalon, that's not enough. Like, I want to be greedy this year with everything because I don't know the next time we're going to be this optimistic about a KU team going into the season. So I think my number will probably be like 9. Because if you told me 9, I'm going to feel good about KU's chances of winning every single one of those 9 games that he's in. And then hopefully, the other couple of games that he's out are against opponents where you don't need him as much.
All right, let's finish things up here. We're going to tie it back around with some whose stat line is in any way relating to some KU football and Heisman talk on Locked On Jayhawks. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate GM. Hey, Locked On Jayhawk fans, I want to take a moment to give you a heads up on a brand new mobile game that I think you're going to love as much as I do, Ultimate Football Head Coach. In this amazing game and simulation, you can get to step into the shoes of a head coach and lead your college football program to glory. Can you imagine actually being the head coach of the Jayhawks? From recruiting players and hiring coaching staff to overseeing training camps and handing school scholarships, you control every crucial detail of your program. It's all in your hands. You're going to be able to handle the pressure. And here's what I really love about the game. You're responsible for calling the offensive plays during the game. Your strategy will not determine the success of your football season, but it's going to shape the future and legacy of the program in addition to that. Ultimate College Football Head Coach is completely free, no ads. It's 100% playable offline. You can play on the go. You can play on an airplane as you want and when you want to. And of course, we have a special offer for Locked On Jayhawks fans. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, all one word, inside the game store and receive a free boost to your program. Make sure you take advantage of this perk as it's going to get your team off to about as good of a strong start as you can imagine. To download the game, just visit ultimate-cfb.com. That's ultimate-cfb.com, or look it up on the App Store or Google Play Store today. Ultimate College Football Head Coach. Begin your coaching legacy today. Finishing things up with whose stat line is it anyway? So Devin Neal has played 37 games at Kansas over his 3 years. How many of those 37, Nick, does he have 20 or more carries?
Man, he wasn't a workhorse year one. 20 is a lot. I'm going to go 13.
Correct answer is 7. Very low.
Wow.
Just 7. Okay, so here's a follow-up to that. In Jeff Grimes' first season at Baylor, 2021, when he was the offense coordinator, they won the Big 12 championship. They played 14 games, including their bowl game. How many games of the 14 did they have any running back, garner 20 or more carries in a game?
How many total games?
14.
11.
Correct answer is 7. So, in 14 games, he basically gave the running back as many, if you're viewing 20 as a solid number, a big number to get to a running back, as Devin Neal has had over 3 seasons. Point being, if we go back to our first conversation, does that alter anything at all that Devin Neal could get the ball even more this season with the current offense?
No, I don't think so. I don't think they're going to shy away from getting talented players touches. Like if it's Daniel Highshaw, if it's Harry Stewart, like they're going to get guys involved. I do think both things can be true though. Like I think Devin can be even more featured piece in the offense while also like not necessarily being a workhorse running back, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe more in the receiving game. I don't know. Maybe just more touchdown opportunity, whatever it is. Okay, well, that's going to do it for this episode. At Nick_Schwert. Nick, where can you check out? What do you got going on right now?
The podcast is called Could Be Wrong. You can check it out wherever you get your podcasts, and you can watch the full episodes on YouTube as well.
All right, you can give me a follow at D Johnson Radio and subscribe to our show here with Locked On Jayhawks and anywhere you get your podcasts. We'll see you next time with LOJ.